walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I need
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and once again, we have the man of the hour. Man, I can pick his brain from here until next year. Colonel Larry Wilkerson. How's it going, Colonel?
Not bad, considering the world.
Well, I wanted to start off asking you a question, but then when I looked at the news, I had to rephrase the first question that I wanted to ask you, and it's dealing with the U.S. government shutdown. How is it that the U.S. government is talking about a shutdown and they just passed a near $1 trillion budget for 2026? And does that show irresponsibility and ineptitude of our leadership?
It's all politics, and that's really a derisive phrase. It's all politics, because both sides are not thinking about the American people. I don't care which party you parse, neither side is thinking about the American people. They're thinking about their own advantage and their own power. There are a few exceptions, of course. Marjorie Taylor Greene on the right has essentially said this is stupid. We should end this and get back to what we need to do. And even said that maybe the Republicans should give a little ground on, the Affordable Health Care Act and what people have to pay for premiums. And on the other side, there have been one or two Democrats who've said we need to get on with business, but mostly they're all playing politics.
So what would be your assessment of Trump's first 10 months in office? And I know that's a loaded question, but
one word, awful. I can't think of a period in my 80 years on this earth, almost 81, a couple of months, where I have seen, and I've been through Dick Nixon, I've been through JFK's assassination, I've been through Jimmy Carter's problems in the desert of Iran. I've not seen as bad a situation as this one is, particularly from the perspective of the executive branch.
What happened to the America First? Because it seems like he just there was a report that came out on RT a few days ago, and I brought this up to Larry Johnson. I brought this up to Scott of Calibrated yesterday, that said that during the genocide in Gaza, the United States funded that to the tune of $21.7 billion.
Yep. And
there was a HUD report that came out a few years back saying to eradicate homelessness across the United States, it would take $20 billion. So the United States is more concerned with furthering genocide in Gaza and in the Middle East. And they paid Israel $21.7 billion, which was $1.7 billion more than what was needed to eradicate homelessness across the country. Does that spit in the face of the people who believe Trump's mantra of America's first?
Throw Ukraine and Yemen into it, and you got $32 billion. So, I mean, it's excruciating. And yes, it defeats the whole concept of America first. Again, I'll go back to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I didn't think I'd ever be doing this, but she's brought into question the idea that we're sending all this money overseas and we've got all these problems in the United States. And by the way, I had this discussion yesterday with a gentleman, and he was talking about how Baltimore is so bad and how Los Angeles is so bad and Philadelphia is so bad. Pick it on cities that have a lot of blacks. In fact, a considerable amount in Baltimore, of course, as you well know, and the district. And I just said, I've lived next to the district for 35 years, go in almost every day. I had a granddaughter go to college in Baltimore, went up there almost once a week and traveled all through the city. I had another granddaughter who went to school in Chicago. I once accompanied her from a restaurant back to her dorm, and she said, "Granddad, why are you doing this?" I said, "Because it's a long walk in Chicago." And she said, "I do this every day. I'm not worried." So I said, "What's your point, dude? Why are you picking on cities that have a significant black population?" Don't answer that. I'll tell you why. Because we still have a damn race problem of enormous consequences. And Trump is exacerbating it because his administration does not like blacks. For that matter, any minority.
But and it seems to be, if you want to take it there, seems like he doesn't like most whites either when it comes to it, because of his policies that are antithesis to that they are destructive to the American republic.
Well, you have to be a Christian nationalist. You know, you have to believe that you should take the oath of office to Jesus and not to the Constitution. And you have to be a person who believes that there are Islamic terrorists in every major city in America. You have to be that in order to be welcomed, even as a white boy, in Trump's administration.
So Colonel, I brought this up also, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Ever since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, nobody's talked about the Epstein files and all of this stuff. And it's amazing because prior to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Trump and his administration did any and everything they could to discredit it, but the news was still picking up, and this was like talk all across the blogs, all across the alternative media, and even making it to the mainstream media. And all of a sudden, when Charlie Kirk dies, nobody is questioning Trump on Kirk anymore. What is this?
Here's my hypothetical telephone call. BB at this end, ding, 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 calls up. "Donald, listen, you got a problem with Epstein. I got a problem with Epstein too, because Barack was one of the major visitors to the island. And he constantly sent emails that said things like, 'I'm not bringing my security detail with me,' to Epstein on the island. And he was also the guy that made sure the last meaningful negotiations for a two-state solution failed at the last minute. Were you being bribed, or were you being blackmailed? Whatever, Ehud, were you? Because you had a hand in doing that at the last minute in a most shocking move. Then, okay, you got a real problem right now, Donald. You got a real problem with Epstein. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to make sure Charlie Kirk goes away. I'm going to help you. And the way he's going to go away is going to be dramatic, and it's going to be, in the news, and it's going to take all the oxygen out of the air. And Epstein will recede into the woodwork. That okay with you, Donald?" "Well, BB, I don't know what you mean." "All right, Donald, you don't need to know." I think he had a lot to do with it. I think BB orchestrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
And there were some trade-offs there for that to take place, because you think about nobody's asking him any of the questions they were asking him prior to Charlie Kirk's death, and now you got U.S. warships off the coast of Venezuela bombing fishing boats and bombing Colombian citizens also, and then you have a massive buildup that most people are not talking about that is going on across the Middle East for Iran, Israel 2.0. And then you have the escalation in Ukraine. Where is all of this leading?
Well, it's certainly leading to a dramatically isolated and alienated position for the United States of America. I would estimate right now that 2/3 of the world hates our guts. And another 20% on top of that 2/3 is looking around trying to figure out what they're going to do as the empire disappears from the face of the earth, because they're dependent on it in some way or another. So we're losing badly, and we're losing all across the globe. It's not just Trump. It started with my president, George W. Bush, in the immediate wake of 9/11 when we just went berserk and started doing things like the Patriot Act and torturing people from the very highest levels in the country. First, we've tortured people before, as you know, in Vietnam and elsewhere, in the Philippines, way back there. But we have never had a president of the United States sign on the dotted line and sanction state torture. George W. Bush did that with Dick Cheney's prompting. So we've been going downhill for quite a while, arguably since 9/11. And we haven't had a decent president. And I voted for Obama. I worked for Obama. I did track 2 diplomacy for Obama with respect to Cuba. And we got a meaningful rapprochement with Cuba, which Trump came in reverse, of course. But I have to say it about him, too. I met with him in the Roosevelt Room in November of 2015. It was the last year of his administration. And he looked right at me and General Paul Eaton, who was sitting on the other side of the table with me. John Kerry, as Secretary of State, was on his left, the president's left. And he said, there's a bias. He said, gentlemen, there's a bias in this town toward war. And I wanted to fall off my chair and say, Mr. President, you just now realize that after 7 years in office and several wars and killing people all over the world with drones? You just realize that? What are you going to do about it? And he spent the next 30 minutes or so telling us essentially they didn't know what to do about it. Well, that's where we are. That's where the empire is. We kill people for profit. We kill people for fun. We kill people because we can. We don't kill people in the name of national security. We don't sanction people in the name of national security. We just do it because we can. We're like the Athenians of old, when they slaughtered all the men, women, and children on Milos. And the guy on Milos who was left looked at the general, Athenian general, and said, why are you doing this? He said, because we can. That's our rationale today.
Oh, my God. One of our channel members had a question for you, but before I go to that question, you brought up something about Afghanistan. And I want to go back to that for a minute, because Trump hasn't kept any of his promises, not started any new war engagements. He criticized Biden for coming out of Afghanistan. He said that it was a waste of money to be there, and now he's threatening the Afghans to let America back into the base, the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. I mean, is this lunacy, and why isn't anyone calling this out?
I don't think he was serious, but if he was serious in any way, it is absurd for a number of reasons, the most prominent of which is the Taliban would eat him up, eat us up. They wouldn't let us back. I mean, he may be thinking he's going to make a deal, give him $20-30 billion. That's the kind of deals Trump makes, and that we'll buy the base back for an extended period of time or whatever. I wouldn't put it past the Taliban to take that deal and then renege on it about 6 months down the road, like he does on his deals. Mm-hmm. But that was a crazy remark. Now, if you're thinking about Israel attacking Iran, which I am every day, every single day, every hour of every day, then Bagram would be a great place to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I talked about that on the show yesterday. On one of my shows, I even showed the bases that the United States have, and if they had Afghanistan, how Iran would be completely surrounded. I mean, surrounded with U.S. Bases or whatever, and this would be the optimal time for Iran to be attacked when the United States is back there. But also, Bagram is close to some of China's nuclear facilities in China too. So I think there may be something to it. But before we go into this Israel thing, Colonel, Ms. Noor says, why do you think the Army and police officer unions have not spoken up against the belligerent and perilous direction we are seeing from the U.S. leadership? America last.
That's a very good question. In fact, when I watched the meeting at Quantico, the demeaning meeting from this little second lieutenant up there lecturing all those generals, to the almost rambling and incoherent remarks of the president, though they were coherent enough to pick up the drift. I am going to use you boys out there and you girls out there, the few of you that are left, I'm going to use you to attack my political enemies in their strongholds in places like Chicago and Portland and New York. That's what he said. That's in essence what he said. I'm going to do domestic operations and you're going to join me. So other than that, I got to say that I find no reason to be hopeful with this president, domestically or internationally. And the question is a good question, but it spreads itself across everything that he's doing, because we're not doing anything right now that's positive. You can say, okay, we do need to clean up places. Oh, fine. I've lived near Washington for 35 years, go in almost every day. My granddaughter went to school in Baltimore for 4 years. My other granddaughter went to school in Chicago for 4 years. I've been in those cities. Philadelphia needs a lot of help. Yeah. Baltimore needs a lot of help. Yeah. Okay. I said to someone the other day, the real problems in some of these cities are not necessarily the kind of problems that Trump is insinuating. The problems are we have still got really bad race relations, terrible race relations. And in some places like Baltimore, I've seen them in my face. I've seen terrible situations in Baltimore between blacks and whites, and among blacks and whites, and among blacks as well. Because what we've done, Alma Powell used to say this all the time. You may disagree wholeheartedly. I'm not a black man, so all I could do was listen to her and listen to Colin. And most of the time, what they told me I thought was pretty accurate. Alma said one time to me, his wife, wonderful woman. She said to me, Larry, we were better off before we desegregated. Our families were intact. Our families were nuclear. You could walk into any of our schools. My father was a principal in Birmingham, Alabama, not of one, but 2 high schools in Birmingham, Alabama. You could walk in any door. You didn't have any closed doors. You could eat lunch off the floors. They were so clean. And if he found a shiv or a knife, God forbid, a gun anywhere in the school, you were gone. You were toast. You wouldn't show up again. She said it was much better. And then we desegregated and got with you white people, and you screwed us. He was a truth teller.
Oh my God. Oh, Colonel, that was a pill to swallow there. Where do you think we're headed now with the Israeli Iranian conflict? Because Putin said that he talked to Bibi, and Bibi wanted him to convey that he did not want escalation, but everything seems to point to escalation. I always tell people, don't just listen to the rhetoric, look at the actions behind that. And we see a massive buildup. We see them attacking people in the West Bank and Gaza. We see them not standing up to any of the negotiations. They're attacking negotiators in Qatar. They're bombing Lebanon. I mean, it seems like they're trying to weaken the axis of resistance or anyone that is allied to Iran, and they want to buy a little more time by conveying that we don't want to escalate. And it seems like they did that in the first negotiations with Hamas. It seems like they did it in the second negotiation with Hamas. They did it with Hezbollah. They even did it with former president of Syria, Bashar Assad, when they were negotiating with him. A lot of people forget about that. And do you believe Netanyahu's sincerity on that? And if you don't, where is this taking us?
That's the question of the hour for the Levant anyway, and to a certain extent for our empire. I'm not exactly sure what Netanyahu, in Hebrew, of course, and behind closed door, went and told Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the other members of his coalition who were threatening to leave if he effected this deal that we're looking at right now. I suspect, being Bibi, he told them, don't worry. It ain't going to happen. Don't worry. When we attack Iran, everything will change. Because when we attack Iran, America will have no choice. That bozo in Washington, Donald Trump, will have no choice but to follow us and to help us defeat Iran and regime change in Iran. He'll have no choice. The call to Putin and how it's been reported, I wish I'd been a fly on the wall, but looks like he's running scared a bit. And he understands that Iran isn't the Iran of 10, 15, 20 years ago. And then if he attacks, he's going to get his rear end handed to him. just as he almost did in the 12 beautiful days that he stopped because they were anything but beautiful. I don't know what that means, though, because the only direction he seems to have to go is to double down on his failure against Hamas, failure really against all the regional enemies he has, because they're all still able to fight him, whether it's Hezbollah or it's Syria or any of the countries that he covets, like Iraq, which is rapidly becoming an antagonist towards Israel too, and even an antagonist towards the few remaining troops that we have in their country. That's a very squirrely deal that we have. They could throw us out at any moment. So I don't know where he's going now, because I think he's running scared. He's not quite sure he should go ahead and attack Iran. China and Russia look like they are committed to helping Iran all the way through. And that's a formidable bunch for him to take on. So I don't know what he's thinking right now. I don't know if he's going to go ahead with it. A week ago, I'd have said 90% certainty Israel will attack Iran. I think it's down to about 60% now, because he's running scared.
But don't you think that all the impetus is on him to attack Iran? Because look at the situation. If we examine the economics of it, Israel is a failed state, and the only way that it continues to survive is money being pumped into it from the U.S., the UK, and the EU, and all three of them are bankrupt, and they are having their financial problems at this moment. So wouldn't it be more advantageous for him to start the war so that he doesn't have to face the political crimes and the crimes against his own so-called people and the crimes against the Palestinians? So it would be more advantageous to him to go ahead and say, well, you know what, it is what it is, let's just do it.
That's the reason I keep it at 60%. that and the fact that it's Bibi. I just don't think he can leave the war toxin. He's got to pursue this until he's either dead or in jail.
And he's willing to sacrifice the Palestinians and the so-called Israelis to keep himself out of jail. And even the Americans.
He's shown that all along. He doesn't care about anything but himself and the Zionist cause. Now, he was not this rabid a Zionist. I mean, he orchestrated the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. There's no question in my mind about that.
Yep.
I've watched the Jewish video.
Yep.
They say these two guys that got kicked out of Israel after they made the video, about a third of the video is actual footage of Netanyahu's political rallies where he's stirring them up to go shoot him. The settlers are just out there with pistols in their hands, and Netanyahu's egging them on. Go shoot that bastard. He wants peace. Go shoot him. So this is the kind of guy we're dealing with. And you're right. I don't think he's going to back off. I just don't. And we're going to be right there, in for a penny, in for a pound. And everyone will forget. And this is tragic. They'll forget Gaza, the West Bank, and everything else when we get in this regional war that might go nuclear. And in any event, is going to go wider than the borders of Iran, because Iran's going to attack everybody that even looks like they're supporting the effort of Israel, including the U.S. at Al Udeid, at King Khalid, in Kuwait, wherever we are on the ground, they'll attack us.
Do you think that they would attack U.S. facilities in Turkey? Because
I don't know. I think they've got enough of a rapprochement with Saudi Arabia and other of the Arab countries like Qatar, where they can tell them, we will not hit you, but we will hit the U.S. So don't think we're attacking you. We're attacking the United States. A very Arab thing as well as Persian. I don't think they'll hit their newly created friends, if you will. And Qatar's always been a friend. Qatar got in trouble with Riyadh for being too friendly with Iran, you may recall. And the Turks actually had to deploy forces down to Qatar to give them some idea of security. But there has of late, including this deal between Pakistan and Riyadh, well, Pakistan has sort of signed on the dotted line for an Article 5 type defense pact with Riyadh. So you can pull Pakistan in too, and they're a nuclear armed state, of course. So, Saudi Arabia is looking at a situation, I think, where Mohammed bin Salman a few years ago went to Islamabad when he first got the defense minister portfolio, took $20 billion of Saudi money with him. And I think he actually effected an agreement with Islamabad that if Iran ever got a nuclear weapon, or for that matter, Israel looked belligerent with its nuclear weapons, Pakistan would ship Mohammed bin Salman 6 or 7, or maybe 20 or 30. I think that's a deal. So you're looking at a real problem in that region if we kick this off with an attack on Iran and other people get involved. You're looking at the potential of going nuclear. And the leader in that would be Bibi. When he gets a feeling that it's existential and his country is going down beneath his feet, and maybe Trump is a little dilatory in coming in to help him, I don't think he will refuse to help him, but he might be a little slow in doing it. Bibi might use a nuke.
Well, what does that say? How would this work? We know that a deal has been made with Arabia and Pakistan, but we know that Iran is not afraid to strike Pakistan because they had a border a strike on Pakistan, and Pakistan struck border areas in Iran recently, right. And then Iran and Pakistan both signed a not a mutual defense clause, but a military agreement to fight terrorism and to have better better ways of working together militarily. Right. And also they've signed a plethora of economic deals. So how would that work if things kick off? Because Pakistan is also in some ways bound to Iran now.
You also have an enormous cohesion being built, and I think it's well on its way to being complete because of the new Chinese railroad that comes through the south of India, the south of Iran, and then turns up the Persian Gulf. This is the third Base Road Initiative railroad. One goes through actually the fourth. One goes through the center south, one goes through the center north, and one goes through the very extreme north. All of these railroads debouch, as it were, in Berlin, on the English coast. I mean, they all are primed to bring Pacific port produce by China, the greatest producer in the world, period. Much more so than we are now, America. Much more so than Germany is now, because we've ruined Germany, to all these places by land, much cheaper and avoiding the United States Navy. So China is primed to turn all of that on, and they've turned the one in Iran on. 2 trains have already made it. To support half the world, if not 3/4 of the world, over land, not have to use the oceans where the Navy, U.S. Navy, kind of still holds some sway. Mm-hmm. So this is China really reaching out to tap the empire, and they're not bashful about it. And these people along these routes are all beginning to realize how much commerce and trade is going to come into them from these road initiatives, especially these land-based railroads. I don't think we're winning. I think we're losing, and we're losing dramatically. And increasingly, those like Israel, who are, leftovers that are trying to make a mess of this for their own benefit, and that's why Netanyahu's doing it, because he's been trying to talk China into doing a deal with him, Russia into doing a deal with him, Turkey into doing a deal with him. He's not had a whole lot of success because everybody sees the real power to the east. And so he's going to be left hanging out on a limb. And I'm sad to say we're going to be hanging out there with him very shortly.
Well, what do you think the policymakers in the U.S. are saying now? Because, excuse me, they alienated India, which they wanted to use as a pole against China. And it was reported a few days ago that Russia and India finally got their payment thing together, because Russia had a lot of money stuck in Indian banks because they couldn't do anything with rupees. But now they're trading the Russian oil for Chinese yuan. All of the Indian sellers buyers are buying it with Chinese money. Then you see Iran selling oil in yuan. You see Venezuela selling oil in yuan. You see Niger and all of the Sahel states are now accepting yuan. What is going through the policymakers' minds in Washington as they see the dollar slipping from its preeminence in the United States, because that's the lifeblood of the military, and the military slipping from its preeminent place?
You have to go back to Henry Kissinger's statement, which is a wonderful statement if you think about it. He was saying it in terms of the power of the United States, but it applies across the board, not just the United States. He who denominates the oil market denominates the world.
Oh.
And that's what's happening. That is what is happening. You just described it. The other aspect of it that is somewhat troublesome for the empire anyway, is we just had the Secretary of Treasury make the most ridiculous remarks I've ever heard. He essentially said on television yesterday that we were going to sanction Russia and India in order to prevent India from buying Russian oil. Now, think about that. How the hell are you going to pull that off, Houdini, Secretary? You can't do that because of what you just said. They're not trading in dollars. They're trading in the most extensive way in yuan, but they're doing it in other currencies. They're even doing commodity exchanges. They're doing basic stuff on the Amur River and over in the really incredibly Chinesified Russian Far East. They are trading every day with commodities. You know, you take these many sheep and I'll take this much of your leather or whatever. And increasingly, they're using the renminbi, the yuan, for other transactions. And look at the pipelines that are being built. The pipelines being built out of Russia, some of its most lucrative oil fields, are going to China. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what are we talking about, Mr. Secretary of the Treasury, who doesn't know your ass from a hole in the ground?
Well, Colonel, what does this do for American policy? Because America had this plan to keep her hegemony through the two islands, the island chains, to keep China hemmed in, to be able to cut off the Malacca Straits. And now we see that China is bypassing all that with the Belt and Road, with the train lines and stuff. And we see, as you just brought up, which I was going to say about the pipelines, which would secure their oil and their gas coming from Russia into them. How can the empire stop that, and how can they deal with that? Because it seems like the whole world is moving from west to east, and the center of that move is China.
You got that right. You got that right. And let me just add another detail here that most people have no comprehension of, no sensation about. China has 6,000 ships in its deep sea fishing fleet, each of which is armed. 6,000 ships. Go ask any Filipino who has been out on Mischief Reef or in that vicinity and looked up from their tiny little patrol craft 7 or 8 decks to the top of a Chinese deep water fishing boat with a cannon aimed at them. 6,000 ships. That's the biggest fleet in the world. We have about 270 ships in our Navy. Now, they're warships and they're more capable than any one of these deep sea fishing ships, but there's 6,000 of them. They had a parade recently, about 3 years ago. They put about half the fleet in the South China Sea with flags flying, guns on them and everything, and lined them up. They went all the way from the port they were coming out of to the middle of the South China Sea. They have so many ships. Oh, by the way, they can build about 20 a month. We can't build one a month. You're right. The power is going that way.
And does that mean that we're becoming more belligerent and more desperate because the Chinese has nearly 250, 260 times shipbuilding capacity? One of their shipyards is bigger than all of the U.S. shipyards combined. Yep. And then we see the change from the dollar to the renminbi. We see the pipelines going into China. We see, as I said, the Belt and Road Initiative. And then we see America being smothered under debt. do you believe that America will become more belligerent because now all of her plans to control China's rise are now stuck in the mud because China has countered them with other things?
Yes, I think we're going to get extremely desperate. I think we're already seeing that. We're seeing that in the proxy war in Ukraine. We're seeing real vivid signs of this in, I call it the arc of crisis, which now extends from roughly the Arctic Circle down through the Baltic Sea, where we're trying to stir something up around Kaliningrad with the Russians, down through Estonia, Latvia, and into Belarusia and into Ukraine, where we really got a bitter war going on, down to Georgia, where we overthrew the government basically, and then the government got its lease back, and we have a government in Tbilisi right now that wants to maintain balance between NATO and Russia. But we're trying to overthrow that government all the way down through Azerbaijan and Armenia and on down into Iran proper, where we're trying to start a war. So all of this arc of crisis has been created by us to stop what we were just talking about. They want those base road initiatives, north, 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 center, and south, stopped. They want them stopped. One of them was literally going to debouch into Ukraine. And through Ukraine, through Kyiv, it was going to go on to Berlin and on to the coast. That's gotten stopped. And why has it gotten stopped? Because we're supporting this war in Ukraine, and Zelensky is our henchman there. So a lot of this has nothing to do really with what the press is reporting it has to do with, local wars, proxy, whatever. It's all about the empire trying to stir up this entire line of conflict in order to keep the roads from functioning fully. And it's not going to work. It's inexorable. The power of China is, and China's just doing this Sun Tzu-like, their mentors are Sun Tzu and Confucius. They don't want a war. They're winning. Why would they want a war? They're winning. They just keep on going. Chug, 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 chug. They have, this will blow you away. They have 1 million charging points for electric cars. We have 17,000.
Whoa.
Their solar fields in Tibet, for example, are up at high altitude where they use about 25% less power and water, and they generate about that amount more electricity because they're at such high altitude. And their solar fields extend further than you can see. And although they're still the biggest polluter because of all the industry and so forth, manufacturing and other things that we don't have, and they're still burning coal, which we sell them. That's about the only people that buy our coal. I don't know if they're buying it anymore. But they are the world's biggest polluter, but they are also the only industrial power that is reversing that situation at the rate they are. In another 10 years, they will be a net zero. They'll be at net zero. And yet they're still producing like they're producing. So their innovation is incredible. Now, they do steal a lot of it from us. I'll admit that. They have spies all over the country stealing stuff. Used to have some of them in my seminars at William and Mary. but they are on a march, and it's inevitable. They're just too powerful.
So before I let you go, Colonel, it's just 2 or 3 questions I need to ask you about Russia, because the United States continues to escalate. There were reports that Trump may sell these Tomahawks to a side country and then give them to Ukraine, but we know that there will be U.S. operators on them. Where will that lead us? Because Russia has allowed this to go so far, and I don't think that using strategic weapons like that would go without a military response. And I think Vladimir Putin, in one of his interviews, he said that it could even go to a military response.
Tomahawk, in a sense, is a tempest in a teapot because, I was at Pacific Command, which is what we called it at the time in Honolulu, Hawaii, PACOM. It's now called Indo-Pac. And we got in 1984-85 the first Tomahawks. It's an old system, very slow system. It's been upgraded many times, but even with the upgrades, it is not a formidable weapon, and it's easy to shoot down. We shot 52 at Syria, you may recall. Trump did it in his first administration, 52. Nobody even knew that they hit hardly. They're point weapons. You want to go after a bunker, you want to go after a hardened facility that's not very big, you send a Tomahawk. What we didn't take on, though, was we said that back to Ronald Reagan and as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Vesey. We said, we don't want these pop guns out here. Our mission is to, if the war goes off, if the Soviets attack in Western Europe, our mission by our war plan is to distract them so they'll divert forces to the Eastern Theater. We can't do that with this little pop gun Tomahawk. We need a nuclear weapon Tomahawk. And the Tomahawk D was nuclear. Well, Reagan smartly, Vesey probably, they said, no, we're not going to do that because it had been too destabilizing to ship them out there with nuclear warheads. So we didn't do that. So all to say, Putin's not worried about the conventional Tomahawk. He's worried about two aspects. One, that it doesn't matter what kind of Tomahawk you have, U.S. people on the ground have to make it fire, and they have to also guide it. So that means the U.S. is in the war, period. No question about it. And the second thing he's worried about is what if one of them coming at him does have a nuclear warhead on it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so he's said very explicitly that will be a declaration of war by NATO on Russia, and I will act accordingly.
So why do you think that they're continuing? That's the point I wanted to make.
They're stupid. They're stupid.
But they're playing with the lives of the entire planet.
Yep.
Being stupid and inept. And so
to this point, that stupidity has not gotten us into really existential problems because Putin is smart. And he doesn't want to put us there because he knows we got about 5,900 warheads too. He's got about 6,000. We got about 5,900. So, rough equivalency. And we've got a fairly robust variety of ways of sending them at him, even though he has better. And with his hypervelocity missiles, he has much better. There's no way we can shoot a hypervelocity missile down. Son of a gun is going so fast, it would be like hitting a bullet times 10 with another slow bullet, like shooting a 45 at a 270 Winchester with the Winchester boosted 3 times. Because these are fast. These missiles go 20,000 kilometers per hour. Think about that. That's 3 times faster than the speed of sound. These are incredibly fast missiles. You can't shoot them down. So he's got that in his repertoire, which tops anything we have. So it would be I won't say it'd be an equal fight. It would be a world-ending fight. And he doesn't want that. And I don't blame him. He's smarter than that. He doesn't want that. Trump does. Here's the scary thing. Trump doesn't even know what he's doing. Trump has no idea what nuclear weapons can do, nor how dangerous it would be to start. And that's scary. It's really scary. The man just doesn't do that sort of thing. He doesn't read. He doesn't study. He doesn't go back and look at all the body of literature we built up during the Cold War over escalation theory and strategic dominance and all these things. And the conclusions that we came to in every single study, don't start this. Don't start it because there's no way you're going to be able to control it once it gets started. It's going to be disaster. You're going to take out the human race and maybe you're going to take out the globe with it. Trump doesn't read that. He doesn't pay attention to things like that.
So my last question to you before I ask, thank you, M. Sparks, for the $4 super sticker. I wanted to ask you, when it comes to this, I was talking to Larry Johnson, and I asked him about what if the U.S. proceeds to strike Russia with tomahawks, and his words to me were, then there will be an Oreshnik moment.
Yep.
And then I asked him, just in Ukraine, and he said it could spread outside of Ukraine.
Might be in Poland, might be anywhere there's a NATO target. Yeah.
So you too believe that if this happens, Russia would respond in kind to show that, listen, you just can't keep doing what you're doing without any consequences?
I think Putin will have by that time reached the end of his rope. He's been very circumspect, very prudent up to this point, but he's going to reach a point where he's going to say, I have to do something to teach them that I am deadly serious. Mm-hmm. What it would be, I don't know. It would probably be a lesser target, if you will, maybe an installation in Poland, maybe an installation somewhere else in NATO. Heck, he could shoot France. I don't think anybody would care much. I hate to say that, but the way Macron's dealing with the world right now, he wouldn't care if they hit his house. He's a dead man walking. Merz is a dead man walking. Starmer's a dead man walking. All three of their economies are collapsing. These are the giants of Europe, right? Britain, France, and Germany. It's tragic what we've done to Germany. Probably the most efficient manufacturing entity in the world, even topping China in some ways, not in output, but in quality and efficiency. Germany was ticking on all 8 cylinders. What did we do? We blew up the pipeline. Germany agreed with it, and we did it. Now they're toast. They can't get their economy back together again.
Oh, my God. I wish I had another hour with you, but I know you're busy. Colonel Wilkerson, thank you so much for joining us on the Red Pill Diaries. And I want you to be blessed and be safe out there. Thank you for your wealth of information and knowledge.
You too. Take care and be safe. Be safe.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Watch out for those stormtroopers.
Gotcha. Everybody, listen, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this platform today. I want to, as I often say when I go out, I say, do right by others, not because there's some material gain or some accolades behind it. Do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, God Almighty is watching you. And as my late mother used to always tell us, God sits high, but he looks low. I want you to know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous. And also hit that like button and share. We're out of here. Thank you. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. We're out. Peace.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a